the answer to some of the questions. If you have answers to some of the questions that I'm going to ask, then I would give you a reward. So kindly participate. Anyone who answers any question correctly will get a reward from me. So let's participate. All right. So the first question is this. What is the name of the man who brought about the modernization theory? All right. Hello, everyone. Kindly make it a point to mute yourself because we want silence for us to have a successful class. As you are all well aware, the duration for the class is time bound. So please, let's mute ourselves so that we can. Great. All right. So if you want to answer the question, kindly raise your hand. You'll be given the opportunity to answer. So the question is in two folds. Here's it. What is the name of the man who brought about the modernization theory, and what was he at the time? We have 30 seconds. If no one is able to answer, the reward will be gone.
Okay, so please, the person's name is Rostov.
What is his full name? All right, the 30 minutes is up.
Can you check the chat? I can't pronounce the name, but then I've typed it at the chat.
Wout Whiteman Rostov. We normally say that WW Rostov, right? That is a simple way. And he wasn't a communist. He was an economist. Do you get the difference? Communism is something else. That is with the Soviet Union. So I want you all to pay attention to that. That is why the book is called The Non-Communist Manifesto, because at the time he was writing the book against the communism that was being practiced in what? The Soviet Union. Do you understand? Great. I am assuming you all understand. So let's move forward. So now that we understand the first stage of the modernization theory, then we move on to the next stage, which is what? Precondition to take off. Precondition to take off. The first trait of the precondition to take off is what? One, external demand for raw materials, which triggers what? Movement or flexibility. External demand for raw materials, which triggers movement and flexibility. What it means is that at the stage of precondition to take off, where a particular state moves from the traditional society, it is the external demand. So what it means is that the demands that come from outside or external places are the things that would trigger these particular people to move from the traditional state. So here, let me give an example. Let's say Accra is a village and someone from Dawadawa is in the city, and the person wants to get raw materials from the village, which is Accra. They use vehicles, right? So with these vehicles, you need a driver. When these particular people come for these raw materials, these particular people in the traditional society that want to transport these particular goods or raw materials to the city, they have to know how to drive cars. So now they start to learn how to drive. So you realize that the external demand for their raw materials is forcing them to change. If you should be moving and the car should get fault at the middle of the road, you don't have any mechanic around. That would mean that you have to learn some science of mechanism that can help you fix your car when it's broken. So what it means is that people from those traditional society, again, with the external demand, will force them to learn certain basic science of cars so that they can fix the cars. because people are demanding these things on like very high demand, they will now have to learn how to use other advanced form of what? Agricultural practice. So now they stop using things like axe, cutlass, and they start using things like combine harvester. They start using things like fertilizer so that they can what? Practice commercial farming. All these things are as a result of what? External demand that is forcing them to what? To change or to move from the traditional society. Please, do you understand? Please, just show a reaction if you understand.
We understand.
All right. I am assuming this young man is speaking the.
No, please, can you take it again?
All right. So we have the traditional society where they use things like they only focus on the primary sector, which is agriculture. Then they use basic technology like cutlass, axe, and there is no centralized government, etc. Right? With the precondition to take off, which is the second stage of the Rostovian theory. The modernization theory can also be called the Rostovian theory because it was what propounded by what? Rostov. According to the Rostovian theory, for a country to move from the traditional society, there are what? External demand for raw materials, which triggers the movement and what? Flexibility. So what it means is that demand from outside or places that are different, that are not in the traditional society, are the things that is going to force this particular what, people in the traditional society to move. So for example, I use the analogy of a car, right? If someone practices agriculture in a village and someone from somewhere wants or demands for what? So for example, demands for sugarcane. Because these particular things will be transported with a car, you'd realize that the person who is what? Who doesn't practice this particular is using the traditional form of agriculture or the traditional system will now be forced to learn how to drive. So you realize that what? The external demand has forced that particular person to be flexible or to change. The second thing is that, so for example, for this particular person to transport these things, it means they are going to use a road. In an instance where a car can break down, there is a very high likelihood that you are not going to get a mechanic on your way. So that would mean that as a driver or somebody who is transporting your raw materials, you have to learn some basic science of what? Fixing a car or some technicalities of ensuring that what? You travel safely. So for example, someone from the traditional society will now learn how to drive, will now learn how to what? Fix petty things in a car engine or maybe some things that are needed to what? To make sure that the car gets to its destination. So all this is just proving one thing, that what? Because of the external demand from outside the traditional society, it is forcing them to what? To change. It is forcing them to move forward. It is forcing them to what? To be more flexible in their actions. And it is forcing them to what? To be progressive. I hope you understand now. All right. So another trait of the precondition to take off stage is that the government plays a leading role in development. The government plays a leading role in development. What it means is that the government is the one that is going to be the leading factor to ensuring that most of these particular things at the stage of precondition to take off, is like comes to reality. So for example, for someone to be able to transport their goods from the traditional society to any other place, they need what? Transportation. For you to be able to transport your goods, you need what? Motorable roads, good roads. And that is where the government comes in. So you realize that the government is the one constructing roads. The government is the one what? Making sure that all these particular things. So for example, industries, they'll be able to change these things into what? Finished products, or the secondary sector, so factories, etc. You realize that the government has a responsibility to do those things. So the government is the one that plays a leading role in what? In development. That is what it means. Do you understand? So these particular two things are some of the traits of the precondition to take off stage. And as always, right, we should always infinitely remain teachable. That would mean that we should always give ourselves chance to learn. So we have to read more. As always, not everything can be provided. So let's equally read more, right? So the next stage is what? Take off. The next stage is what? Take off. With that particular stage, one of the traits is that the primary sector shrinks. When they say the primary sector shrinks and the secondary sector expands. So just like I mentioned earlier, there are three factors of production or sectors that ensure production. So we have the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. So with the primary sector, they focus on raw materials and agriculture. Those are the things they do. Then in the secondary sector, it's more or less like factories, industries that transform the products of the primary sector into finished products for consumption. Then we have the tertiary sector, which is example, banks, law firms, etc. So with the takeoff stage, the primary sector, which is the sector that focuses on agriculture, which is predominant in the traditional society, starts to shrink, starts to come down. People don't focus on that anymore. Then the secondary sector that transforms those products into finished goods start to expand. So in that particular stage, you realize that there is a high level of revolution, a high level of industrial revolution. Sorry, that is the right word. So for example, in the 19th century, etc., for example, in the West, that was the time they call the Green Revolution or the Industrial Revolution, where a lot of industries were being brought into existence in the West. Do you understand? And that is what the takeoff stage looks like. So the primary sector shrinks, the secondary sector expands, and it is predominantly identified by industrial revolution or industrialization. I hope we all understand. Great.
Yes.
I want you to note this, right? Western Europe had to. So I remember that day in class, somebody asked the question, say, if it is these external demands that are going to force this particular traditional societies to expand or to be more flexible or to develop, then what about the West? What were some of the things that external demands that forced them to expand or that forced them to be more flexible to move to another stage? And I remember the answer like it was just yesterday. One is Western Europe had to adjust and reorient their traditional ways, which was the trigger by external means. What it means is that with Europe, somebody asked the question, well, if in traditional societies, for them to move, you need external demands, which is going to force them, what demands force the Western people to move? And I remember the answer that Dr. Kudicha gave was that it is they had to reorient their ways or adjust from their traditional ways, which was triggered by external means. So for example, you remember in the industrial revolution, one thing that was happening was a lot of industry. So they needed people to be consuming these particular things because they are doing a lot of things. So even amongst themselves, there were demands. Do you get it? And those particular demands were the things that forced them to change. So one thing that we need to understand is that this particular thing creates a link between the factors of production. And here is what it means. Just like I said that the factors of production, you have the primary, secondary, and tertiary. In the instance where the primary sector brings the raw materials, and there is no industry to transform them into finished products. What happens is that there is no connection or interaction between those two sectors. And you see, basically, the tertiary sector is a sector that is so for example, law firms, banks, etc. In the moment where there is no interaction, development doesn't really happen. So at the takeoff stage, there is a very strong and serious link between the factors of production. So what it means is that when the primary sector gets the raw materials, it goes to the secondary sector, which is transformed into into finished products for consumption. And you see, the tertiary sector, which happens to be banks, law firms, etc., these particular secondary sectors are able to for example, register, and insurance companies, etc., right, are in the tertiary sector. These particular people from the primary sector or maybe the secondary sector, for example, can ensure their companies or ensure their factories in these particular companies to safeguard them. So you realize the link. So for example, someone from the primary sector can equally go for loans from the bank in the tertiary sector in order to diversify their farming practices or their cultivation practices. And that is the link. So the primary sector feeds the secondary and helps feed the tertiary, which so it's a forward backwards leakage, a link between them. So you people should keep track of these particular things because some of them will be more relevant moving forward. Then we have the next stage, which is the drive to maturity. Drive to maturity. Drive to maturity, right? At this particular stage, one thing that is very predominant is there is increased public and private investment in knowledge production and in industries. You see, when you move from the precondition to take off and you get to take off and you move towards the drive to maturity, means that your country is becoming developed. So having had industries that are working, now the focus comes on innovation and improvement. So for example, you realize that most companies in the West, in as much as they are very effective and efficient, they are always thinking of better ways of doing things. So for example, Elon Musk at Tesla, right, is always finding ways to do things better. It's always finding innovative ways. That is the things that happen in the drive to maturity. So they try to find, like green gas, for example, electric cars. All these things are innovative acts or innovative practices that happen in the drive to maturity. Because at this stage too, in as much as we have this industry, we want to make sure that most of these particular things are very relevant and consistent, which forces. So for example, government will give money for people to go for like research actions or for people to go out and do things, and fund researches, fund people to go out and do innovative stuff. That is going to help bring new development, like and innovation into those particular countries. So those are some of the things that is very predominant in the drive to maturity, innovation and improvement, where they improve upon the already existing industries. There are a lot of examples out there. Maybe after the session, we'll talk about them, but because of time, we can't talk about all of them. So let's move ahead to the next stage, which is the age of high mass consumption, or the age of the age of high mass consumption. At this stage, the assumption is that the country is developed. So some of the things that they focus on, because in a country where you have industries that are working, there is leakage, forward backwards leakage between the factors of production, low employment. Now focuses on something else. So at that particular age, that is the age of comfort. That is one of the traits, the age of comfort. So you realize that a lot of people want to leave Africa and go abroad. So United States, Britain, etc., because they are at the stage of high mass consumption. There is comfort. they can rest. They can think about certain things that we consider are not important or trivial. That they've gotten to the stage where they can think about those things. Then the next trait is what? The art and music. So those people start to really appreciate art and music. So you realize that things like abstract art, you see somebody who just put their hand in paint, put it on a board, and somebody will buy it for $200,000. And somebody will say, why would you spend such huge money on it? It's because you don't have. So you will say that it's a waste of things. So you can't appreciate those things because you think you have more important things to think about. So Ghana, for instance, somebody suggested, Mr. Suleiman said what earlier in the class that what Ghana is at the stage of takeoff. At the stage of takeoff where now we have industrial revolution, you don't have time to come and think about music and act. You are thinking of what? Bringing out industries that are going to help what? With the growth of the economy or the development of the country. And at that stage, they start to think about things like what? Animal rights. Then they start to say things like even animals have rights. In a country like Ghana, where people are suffering, where people are unable to get a 3 square meal, right? Which the government is trying by no means, it is stages. A country like that cannot come and think about animal rights. Have you ever seen anyone talking about animal rights in Ghana? But if you watch the news, you would realize that in the countries like United States of America, etc., they're talking about animal rights, things like LGBTQ, other things that ordinarily we wouldn't think about because we've not gotten to that stage. Because at this point where you are comfortable, you start to look for new things to talk about. I hope we understand. So those are the things that are at the stage of high mass consumption. People are comfortable. Since people start to think about things like, and they appreciate true acts and music and animal rights. And they start to make arguments like even animals have rights. Good. So there is another stage that some people argue, although we've been told that we shouldn't really add it to the stages of development according to Rostov because it wasn't in his book, but it is an argument that came up like not too long ago, and they say that there is a stage that is called beyond high mass consumption. At that stage is theoretical, right? And no country has gotten to that stage yet, so we don't even have examples for it. That is the time where people presumably will have things like flying cars. We have things like people will be given, all those scientific theories that they are talking about, But some people also argue that countries like United States will get to the stage beyond high mass consumption. So, those are some of the things that the modernization theory is about. You get it. These are the stages. So, in summary, the stages of the tradition the Rostovian theory is what? We have the traditional society, then we have the precondition for takeoff. We have takeoff, we have drive to maturity, and we have stage of high mass consumption. There is a simple way that you can write this that you get a very good understanding of. And that is why even though we've passed that class, I still have an in-depth knowledge about it. So I'm going to share that note with you guys when I am through your friend, which is Nana Bafo, so that you can all get it because you are all striving for academic excellence. So let's move forward, right? So having talked about how nice the development theory is, one thing we need to appreciate as political scientists is nothing is absolute. Every single thing that we have has issues. Every single thing in this world has its own problems and criticisms. Do you understand?
Yes.
So having said that, we are moving forward towards the criticisms of the modernization theory, the criticisms or the critiques to the modernization theory. There are a lot of critiques to the modernization theory, and we are going to talk about every single one of them. I hope you are all excited. So
Yes.
one thing that I want you to notice, according to Rostov, and in his book of Non-Communist Manifesto, in development, right, He said economic growth and economic development move hand in hand. So I want to give an explanation to something that you understand. It will put it into context for you to understand some of the critique. So first, I want to explain what economic growth is, right? So economic growth is an increase. Economic growth is an increase in the production of what? Economic goods and services in one period of time compared with what? A previous period. That is what economic growth is. It is what? The increase in the production of economic goods and services in one period of time compared with what? A previous period. Then that is the explanation of economic growth. Economic development is this. Economic development is programs, policies, or activities that seek to improve the economic well-being and quality of life of people in a community. Economic development is programs or policies or activities that seek to improve the economic well-being of what and quality of life of people in a particular community. The reason why this is important is that according to Rostov, he believes that for a country to develop, economic growth and economic development move hand in hand. And now that we understand economic growth and economic development, let's dive into the critiques. I want you guys to note this. So first, we have the ancient China Empire. The ancient China Empire was used as a case study to criticize what? The modernization theory. According to Rostov, and I want you to note this, when he was writing the book of non-communist manifesto, he focused only on United States of America as a case study. He didn't focus on any other country. He used United States of America. So some people argue that it's unfair to use only one system or one particular economic system to determine or to write a book to say that that should be the model for development for every country. Because what? Every single country has different historical background, different features, or what? Different resources. So you cannot use only your own to be a model for development. So the ancient China Empire, according to Rostov, for a country to develop is a stepwise evolution. But the China Empire, for example, was one of the greatest empire in the past, in history. Do you know what happened to that empire? That empire collapsed. But as we stand now, as we are speaking, the China Empire is growing again. They didn't go through any stage. So it begs the question, if you are saying that for any country to develop, it needs to go through a stage, then why is it that their country, they were one of the biggest and the most powerful empire in history, they got destroyed or they collapsed, and now they are becoming one of the biggest again. They didn't go through anything. So that is a critique. You get it? Then another critique was that, which is very important, and this is dear to my heart. I remember vividly as Dr. Kudicha said, he said what? They cannot tell us that United States of America, as a case study, should be the model for development, because what they are trying to say is that for every country to develop, you have to engage in what? Human trafficking and slavery. Because one thing we can all agree is that what? United States of America was built on the backs of what? Of Black people. That was the time when we had things like the transatlantic slave trade. And they used the people of Africa to go and build their country. So if they are saying that we should use them as a model, what they are saying is that we should all engage in what? Human trafficking and in slavery. Do you understand? That is another critique. I'll do a better summary and I'll share it with you guys, okay? And they are also saying that the Europe, right, the Western people could not have developed without what? Imperialism and what? Colonialism. So another critic is saying that, well, if you are saying we should use them as a model, then what you are equally telling us is that we should do colonization and imperialism, because at the time they wouldn't have developed without what? Colonization and what? Imperialism. So that cannot be the only model for what? For development. Then Another one is what? The moral. Okay. So another critique is that what? American capitalism. Then, for example, you see, I mentioned that what? According to Rostow, for a country to develop, or according to its stages of development, economic development and economic growth move hand in hand. But we have certain countries that are growing economically, but what are not developing economically. So, for example, a country like Ghana in 2018 was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. But we were not growing in economic development. We were growing economically, but it wasn't translating into the lives of the people. So there was no economic development. Do we understand? Then we have certain countries that are not developing nor growing. They are just stagnant. You have countries like what? Cuba. Some people say Cuba. All these things are critiqued to say that what? The Rostovian theory is not absolute, and those were some of the loopholes that people identified. So, having said all this, what is the moral of the story? Or what can we deduct from the fact of this whole particular thing? And what we can say is that, and I want you to note this, development or underdevelopment has what? External dimensions. Do we understand? Development or underdevelopment has external dimension. You cannot say that what? For a country to develop, they need to go through only your stages of development. If there are what? External dimensions. That is the moral of the story. So this is a whole summary of what the modernization theory looks like, according to what? The Rostovian theory, according to W.W. Rostov, who proponed the modernization theory. Do you understand? We have only 5 minutes for the class to end. I wish I could do a summary of everything we learned. But for now, I'm going to take 3 questions. Then after taking these questions, we are going to close for today and we'll continue some other time. So the floor is open for questions. But I hope we all understand. If you don't have questions, I have questions for you. All right. The person who raised, I don't know, his or her hand should.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, please. My name is Mark Abuja. I want to ask the difference between the development economy and development science.
Well, development economy and development science, in my opinion, something that is too relevant to this particular session that we are having. So what we'll do is that you should reach out to me like personally, and I'll give you an explanation to it, because we want questions that are relating to what has been discussed here. Do you understand? So I'll leave my details so that you can ask me those particular things personally, and I'm going to give you explanations to them. Do you get me? The one who asked the question, do you understand? Because we don't have time. We want questions that are pertaining to what we studied here. All right. Please, is there any other question?
Hello.
Hello, kindly ask your question.
It's not like more like a question, but I want to ask, like those who were not able to join the class early, will the video be, lecture will be posted on YouTube so that we can go over?
Yes, please. It will be made available on YouTube so that you can all get it and study. But, the theories are many. We just finished with one of the types of the theories. So we'll do other classes to give better understanding. All right. But if you don't understand anything, I'm going to leave my details in the group chat so that you can reach out to me and I'll give you a better explanation. Or you can reach out to Nana and he would let you get to me, then I can answer your question because time is almost up. Oh, unfortunately,
put your number on the chat so that we can have your number, and maybe in case of anything, we can talk to you.
yes, and also know that it will be what? It will be uploaded on YouTube for everyone to get it. That is a very wonderful initiative by NBA, so that you can access it. All right. Without further questions, we are going to end this class. I've sent my name and my detail, my contact number in the group chat. So you kindly reach out to me if you have any questions, or you can reach out to Nana Bafor, and he's going to what? He's going to let you get in touch with me, then I can answer all your questions. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you all for your audience, and I'm very grateful for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge on this particular topic. So I hand over to the moderator. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.